WCW NWO Revenge was a critical and commercial juggernaut on the Nintendo 64, moving 1.88 million copies in its lifetime, earning it the distinction of being the highest-selling pro wrestling game on the console, and one of the N64's highest-selling third-party titles as well, putting into perspective just how big and mainstream professional wrestling was back in the late 90s. The World Wrestling Federation had grown envious over their competitors' immense success in the video game market. The WWF's games, developed by Acclaim Entertainment, had failed to meet expectations time and time again. As a result, in 1999, the WWF would abruptly sever its ties with Acclaim after 10 long years, giving them the boot in favor of starting up a new partnership with publisher THQ, one that would prove increasingly more lucrative as time went on. THQ would yet again turn to the wonderful folks at Aki Corporation and have them develop two more stellar wrestling games for the N64, the first of which being WWF WrestleMania 2000, released in late 1999. In WrestleMania 2000, just like Aki's past wrestling titles, the phenomenal grappling system in it allowed you to satisfyingly perform a combination of light and strong strikes and grapples by tapping or holding the face buttons associated with them. The controls were very easy to learn and made this fast-paced, arcade-style wrestling game simple to pick up and play for someone of any age and skill level. Just like I mentioned in my review of the WCW N64 games, the match pacing in WrestleMania 2000 is the same. The spirit meters, now called Attitude, pulsate with the crowd reaction. Matches can become epic back-and-forth affairs and accurately simulate the ones in real life. The movesets for the wrestlers were expanded, adding in a few more button and joystick combinations than what was found in Revenge. The move animations were overhauled even further in WrestleMania 2000, that would carry over into its sequel No Mercy. Many of them, especially those for the signatures and finishers, are my favorite versions of them in any wrestling game, period. They look so lifelike. This was also the first game to have The Rock remove his elbow pad for his people's elbow. Well, an animation that simulates it at least, if anyone out there gives a shit. One of the new additions to the matches gameplay-wise that wasn't featured in the WCW games is that now your opponents could be knocked down and placed in a seated position, giving you even more situational strike and grapple moves that you could perform on them. In every wrestling game Aki released, there was clear improvement made to the AI, and WrestleMania 2000 is no exception. It's better and more challenging than ever, with more reversals happening and counter-move animations implemented. In WrestleMania 2000, you've got singles matches, tag team matches, and triple threats. Tag team matches are fun, but have considerable frame rate dips in them. A debuting match type in this game was the cage match, which I would have killed to have in Revenge the year prior. Could have had a lot of fun with it. The cage matches in WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy are some of the best in any wrestling game, in my opinion. Why? Because the gimmick can be used as a weapon against your opponent at any time in them. A lot of cage matches in wrestling games act as set dressing for what boils down to a pretty standard wrestling match. Sure, you can climb the sides of the cage and jump off the top, but not enough of the games allow you to use the steel as a weapon itself, which I think is essential in this match type. Aki's N64 games would be on top with this for many more years afterwards, especially when looking at the wrestling games released on the early PlayStation consoles. Their cage matches were pretty lame for a long time. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. You've got other notable WWF matches and gimmicks like the King of the Ring tournament, pretty self-explanatory. The Royal Rumble functions the exact same way as the Battle Royal did in Revenge, allowing you to choose any number of wrestlers as long as that number is an increment of 4. but unlike Revenge, the maximum amount you can choose is 30 and not 40, which makes sense because 30 was the number used in the Royal Rumble match. We've got to stick to the brand here. I like the addition of the countdown timer in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, along with crowd noise to go along with it, building up the anticipation between entrants. In Revenge, whenever someone was eliminated, the next entrant would enter the ring immediately. In WrestleMania 2000, the timer gives this match type a bit more room to breathe and pace itself. This game has all the arenas you'd expect in it. Raw is War and Sunday Night Heat, equipped with the iconic Titantron. Survivor Series from 1998, subtitled Deadly Game, which was a massive tournament for the vacant WWF Championship. The stages for Royal Rumble and King of the Ring use that bland tunnel a lot of WWF pay-per-views from around that time lazily recycled. SummerSlam is modeled after the Highway to Hell installment from '98, which had Stone Cold go up against The Undertaker in the main event. I love how the gates open up as your wrestler walks out. The WrestleMania arena is interesting because while the game is called WrestleMania 2000, the actual event was still months away, so the WrestleMania 15 venue was reused and the number 2000 was placed behind the WrestleMania logo instead of the Roman numerals XV. Something I truly admire about this game and No Mercy is the fact that you could book your own title matches and exhibition with ease. This is something wrestling games took forever to get down, and it's kinda insane if you think about it. After these WWF Aki titles, this title match option was not made available again until, I believe, SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, which is just inexcusable. The only way you had been able to have title matches in the past was by playing through a form of career mode, arcade ladder, or deal with that excruciating ranking system that was found in those earlier PS1 SmackDown titles. Why was having title matches in exhibition so difficult for so long? Moving on now to the massive and impressive roster in WrestleMania 2000, totaling nearly 60. The game was released at the controversial peak of the WWF's Attitude Era, when its content was at its most violent, raunchy, and emphasized sheer shock value above everything else. Things were getting out of control. By late 1999, the WWF had lost many of its advertisers and were forced to pull back on the reins a little bit. Owen Hart had tragically fallen to his death at the Over the Edge pay-per-view that May in Kansas City, a victim of the company's needless pursuit to go bigger and crazier to stay well ahead of their competition, World Championship Wrestling. If Owen was to be included in WrestleMania 2000 originally, early in its development, he had been removed long before it came out, for obvious reasons. Other things going on in the World Wrestling Federation at the time included their biggest draw, Stone Cold Steve Austin, having his workload lightened due to nagging injuries. He would end up having neck surgery in late '99 for the underlying spinal issues that stemmed from the botched piledriver delivered to him at SummerSlam '97 by the aforementioned Owen Hart. He was written off TV and wouldn't return until late into 2000. During Stone Cold's absence, we saw other names enter the main event scene. The Rock rose further into superstardom, and Triple H, formerly Hunter Hearst Helmsley, would betray DX at WrestleMania 15 and side with the McMahon family's corporation. He would alter his ring attire, taping his wrists and wearing shorter wrestling trunks, winning his first world title on the Raw following SummerSlam '99. Triple H's new gimmick would make its video game debut in WrestleMania 2000. I think the most prominent and memorable storyline of 1999 centered around the Ministry of Darkness, though. Undertaker had become one of the company's biggest heels, the ruler of this satanic cult, which consisted of the Acolytes, Farouk and Bradshaw, Midian, Viscera, and the Brood, Gangrel, Edge, and Christian. Undertaker would wear priest-like robes, take orders from a mysterious higher power, and he and his minions would perform kidnappings, ritual sacrifices, and speak incantations intended to convert other wrestlers into the ministry. The storyline got pretty ridiculous, silly, and fucked up, but I've always believed the ministry stage of The Undertaker's career to be an underrated one. I think the concept was awesome, it just wasn't executed that well, especially near the end. The rest of the roster in WrestleMania 2000 is good, though a lot of it would change shortly after its release. It didn't stay current for long, as the WWF's unpredictable nature meant that it was in a constant state of flux. WrestleMania 2000 marked the WWF video game debuts of Chris Jericho, who had jumped ship from WCW, and the Hardy Boys, when they were managed by Michael Hayes. This was the only WWF game to feature both Brian Christopher and Scott Taylor in their Too Much gimmick, before they were repackaged as the hip-hop inspired Too Cool. You've got wrestlers like Blue Meanie and Meat, who had very short and forgettable stints with the company during that period, but still managed to make their way into this game. The Headbangers, Marsh and Thrasher, make their final WWF video game appearance here. By this point, Thrasher had become a singles competitor though, and Marsh had been renamed Chaz, later teaming with D'Lo Brown. Jeff Jarrett's final WWF game was WrestleMania 2000 as well, seeing as his contract expired in October of 1999, and he would choose to return to WCW. Most upsetting is the fact that this was the last game to feature the late Darren Drozdov before his career-ending injury, an injury that factored into his premature death last year. I'm gonna finish off my look at WrestleMania 2000 by discussing its main modes. The first is pay-per-view, that lets you create an event from scratch and play through its matches from start to finish. This mode would pop up several more times in wrestling games throughout the years. Most of your time is going to be pumped into Road to WrestleMania though, which is essentially this game's version of a season mode. You choose a wrestler to play as, and their partner, who the game will assign you in tag matches, and work your way through the ranks, winning each of the WWF championships. As ambitious as this mode was, I don't think it's very fun or holds up all that well. Compared to the revolutionary story mode we would get in No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000's feels very barren. There aren't really any storylines in it. Very few cutscenes happen outside of the odd feud, where a wrestler will call you out or interfere in one of your matches. There are hidden wrestlers you unlock by winning certain championships and matches at pay-per-views, but that's about it. I think the most notable one is the final title match against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. I don't think you can go into the event holding the world title because you get stripped of it after the Royal Rumble. The only way to make it to WrestleMania and fight for the championship is by winning the Rumble. No easy task. While Road to WrestleMania was better than any of the attempts at season mode made in wrestling games prior to it, it was still supremely flawed. I find it to be too damn repetitive and a slog to sit through. You play through a total of like 60 matches, and there just isn't enough match variety to keep you engaged. Since there aren't any real storylines either, you're playing so many of them without context, just one after the other after the other. If you win every match, you end up holding multiple titles at once and defend several at each pay-per-view, which can be exhausting and make the mode take even longer to complete. Road to WrestleMania continues whether you win or lose, which is nice, but none of it feels very rewarding. Unlocking all of the secret wrestlers, especially HBK, can be a pain in the ass. The difficulty level in this mode is very inconsistent. Regular matches and those involving the lower level championships are fine, but any with higher stakes to them, like the King of the Ring final or the world title, are hard as shit. 99% of your offense is blocked by your opponent. Even the cheap shots you can deliver when your wrestler is getting to their feet, your desperation strategy, go completely avoided. It's terrible.
WWF No Mercy.
But here we go, folks, the icon, the legend, WWF No Mercy on the N64, considered by many to be the greatest professional wrestling game of all time. I think nostalgia plays a big factor in that for a lot of people when they were young, staying over at friends' houses to play it, and that realization that times have changed. But even still, this game has so much to offer for any fan of the sport of pro wrestling. It was released in November of 2000, the most profitable year the WWF had during the Attitude Era. By then, their competition was on dire straits, and victory was all but inevitable for them. No Mercy's additions are less gameplay related and more content based. You've got a lot more match types like handicap, Iron Man, special referee, and by changing the match rules, just like in WrestleMania 2000, you could also make them elimination style, first blood, or submission. The cage match returns, but this time the steel is silver, just like it had been on TV, replacing the iconic black from the earlier years of the Attitude Era. Hardcore matches became a lot more enjoyable as well, as you could Irish whip your opponent and fight in various backstage areas. And since this was the N64, there were no load times to speak of, unlike some other wrestling games that offered this same feature during this period. I think the most noteworthy new match type would have to be the ladder match though. In this game, they can be really fun and lengthy. You climb up the ladder just like you do the cage. The AI doesn't always go for you when it should in multi-man matches, but this style of ladder match was the best for a long time. The early SmackDown games were a joke with how quickly they would end. In No Mercy, ladder matches are satisfying. I love when you land on the ladder for moves, you hear a crashing sound effect. There's no animation of your wrestler reacting to it, but the sound gives you the impression that they did. It's a simple and effective technique. When we were kids, fuck, even now as an adult, when a wrestler lands on or near a weapon in these games, I always tell myself they hit it anyways. It makes matches more epic that way. And here in No Mercy, Aki knew that and played into it. It's awesome. The roster in No Mercy is much stronger than in WrestleMania 2000. This was the height of the Attitude Era talent pool. Kurt Angle makes his video game debut here. Angle had been gaining a lot of momentum that year, winning his first world title the month before No Mercy came out, at the pay-per-view of the same name. Undertaker had transitioned from his dead man gimmick into a more humanized, American badass version of the character, wearing denim and riding to the ring on a motorcycle. You had some newcomers like Crash Holly, weighing in at allegedly well over 400 pounds. I think he's off by a few. Light heavyweights like S.A. Rios, Taka Michinoku, Too Cool, formerly Too Much, and Rikishi. Perry Saturn, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Chris Benoit, a group of WCW defectors labeled the Radicals, and a few ECW alumni as well, who were trying to make a name for themselves in the Fed, like the Dudley Boys and Taz. I think No Mercy has one of the best rosters in any wrestling game, hands down. No Mercy had the strongest story mode in professional wrestling games for quite some time. It took a few years and another console generation before it was outshined, in my opinion. You had 7 different story paths to choose from, centering on the various WWF championships. Winning or losing matches, and succeeding or failing any bonus stipulations in them in certain chapters would cause your story to fracture down separate unique pathways. The story mode was no longer repetitive like in WrestleMania 2000, and instead promoted the idea of playing through the mode multiple times to get all of the different branching outcomes. No Mercy onwards marked a significant change in many pro wrestling games. Their story, or season modes, became far more layered than they had been before. The storylines you got would all depend on which matches you won or lost, which wrestlers you played as, which choices you made, and of course, a bit of luck sprinkled on top. Each new playthrough of these modes would feel different from the last. I believe in order to do an effective retrospective on these wrestling games, I can't just skim over their season modes. I need to break my experiences with them down storyline by storyline. My analysis of them in this way will allow us to further peer into the state of the wrestling product at the time that these games came out, the eras in which they were trying to emulate. It'll be like opening up a time capsule, and it will give all of you watching a sense of the kind of stuff to expect if you're playing these games and their season modes for the first time, or if you are thinking about revisiting them after many years. With most of these season modes I've been playing and capturing for these retrospectives, I've been doing them on the hardest difficulties, because that makes the outcomes of the matches more surprising and keeps things as interesting as possible for me. With No Mercy though, as it is with all of the Aki wrestling games on the N64, I've never been good enough at them to play them on hard, at least consistently, so I'll be playing on normal difficulty instead. I'll be running through every championship path offered in this mode. They vary in length depending on what title you go for. Some span one pay-per-view, others two, and a few of them three. The first championship I decided to go after was the light heavyweight title that the WWF introduced in late 1997 in response to WCW's popular cruiserweight division. I chose to play as the Iceman turned ladies' man Dean Malenko. The light heavyweight story starts off with a grueling four-way elimination match on Raw to determine the number one contender for the title, currently around the waist of Taka Michinoku, and I guess it must be an intergender one, because the match was between myself, Grandmaster Sexay of Too Cool, Latino Heat, Eddie Guerrero, and Team Extreme's Lita. Lita was eliminated first with a Tiger Bomb, my front special. Sexay went out with a simple suplex. I let Eddie go for the cover on that one. And then Eddie was eliminated using my back special, a rolling pin of some kind. I forget the name of it. I got my shot against Taka immediately on the following episode of SmackDown. Just like in WrestleMania 2000 and its Road to WrestleMania mode, No Mercy's story mode has the difficulty increase dramatically during high-profile matches, and it's quite unfortunate because at times it can feel damn near impossible, harder than the hardest difficulty in exhibition even. The AI telegraphs every bit of offense you go for, even before you think about doing it. As previously mentioned, the cheap shots you can deliver when your wrestler is getting up, an act of desperation, are futile. The inconsistent and frustrating difficulty spikes in this game would rear their ugly head numerous times throughout my championship mode playthroughs. If you couldn't guess already, Taka kicked my ass, dropping me right on my head with his dreaded Michinoku driver. Lita had interfered in our match, and on Raw, I would attack her in the parking lot. I don't condone violence against women, but I guess she had it coming in this story, costing me my hard-earned title opportunity. Grandmaster Sexay would be in cahoots with Taka, and I would have a brawl with him in the sports lounge. He put me through the pool table with a running bulldog, and I showed him the proper way to use a pool cue. I then locked him in Malenko's finisher, the Texas Cloverleaf, and then got the pinfall on him with a Tiger Bomb. On SmackDown, I was made to think I was going to get a rematch for the light heavyweight title against Taka, but instead, I was put in a 2-on-1 handicap match. I hate doing these fucking things. You never know how difficult the game is going to make it for you. This one was easier though, like No Mercy was pitying me or something. It decided to be nice and threw me a bone. I won the handicap match and moved on to a championship ladder match against Taka at Survivor Series. I took a pretty big bump off the ladder after Taka knocked it down with a running shoulder strike. He also whipped me into it a few times, but I managed to pull down the title in a little under 6 minutes. First championship mode down, and thankfully, a success. Next up for me was the European Championship. I chose to play as everyone's favorite, X-Pac. The story started out with a title shot right out of the gate on Raw against the current champion Eddie Guerrero. The difficulty was immense, and I got my skinny ass handed to me on a silver platter. I managed to bust him open during the bout, but he pinned me following a nasty stalling brainbuster. Having to work my way up again, I met with Shane McMahon on SmackDown, who offered to help me win the title from Eddie. I told him to go fuck himself, and it was a decision I regretted immediately as Shane's hired muscle, the Big Boss Man, attacked me backstage in the boiler room. Boss Man was really hard too. I didn't know what was going on, why the game was deciding to punish me so harshly so early on. Despite the odds stacked against me, I was able to hit Boss Man with a couple of X Factors and pin him with a small package. At this point, I was wishing I teamed up with Shane instead of going against him. On Raw, still pissed at me, he teamed up with Boss Man to beat the shit out of me in the locker room. By some miracle of God, I managed to sneak away with a victory with yet another trusty small package. At the King of the Ring pay-per-view, Eddie Guerrero defended his title against Boss Man, and Shane and I both interfered in the match at several points. The only way to progress the story was by helping Eddie win, which I did. Shane then had a grudge with both me and Eddie Guerrero. He had us team up on SmackDown against Billy Gunn and Road Dogg, the New Age Outlaws. On Raw, Shane would introduce another obstacle for us, his hired assassins in the form of the APA, Farouk and Bradshaw. We would go to war in a hardcore tornado tag. The difficulty spiked here again, but with the help of the weapons, mainly the steel steps, I was able to even the odds and defeat them. At SummerSlam, I acted as special guest referee in a title match between Eddie Guerrero and Shane McMahon, which was a lot of fun. I wish the story would have put me in a referee shirt for it. I called the match right down the middle at first, but power corrupts, and Shane had been a complete douchebag, so I started attacking him, turning the match into a handicap. There was a funny bit of miscommunication that happened during the beatdown though, when Eddie hit me with his rear special by mistake. His AI believed the move had been done on an opponent, so he continued to target me. Since I had beaten up Shane, he was targeted at me as well, and for a minute or so, both men went to town on poor defenseless X-Pac. Eddie Guerrero walked away the victor, and out of the kindness of his heart, after everything I had been doing for him the past several weeks, he gave me another title shot at Survivor Series to close off the European Championship story. I hit my newfound friend with an X Factor and took home the gold. 2 titles down, 5 more to go. I decided to move on to the Hardcore Championship with my next story playthrough. I chose to be the human suplex machine, Taz. My first match of the story was against British Bulldog on Raw, and I took him to Suplex Town. Keep in mind, this was years before it had developed into a full-fledged city. After beating Bulldog, the head honcho himself, Vince McMahon, would meet with me backstage. He believed I should be the next Hardcore Champion, giving me a #1 contender matchup against Matt Hardy on SmackDown. I made the less popular Hardy Boy, we all know it's true, tap out to the Taz mission. I would win the Hardcore Championship in match 3 of my story by defeating the current champion Al Snow. On SmackDown, Vince would come out and, to inject some more excitement, announce a 24/7 rule for the Hardcore title. I am forced to defend the belt anywhere at any time against the likes of Jeff Hardy in the locker room, putting him through the tables located there. Then Pat Patterson of all people wants a piece. Our fight goes from the boiler room out into the arena hallways, then a pool hall, and ends in the back of a truck in the parking lot. The APA would approach me backstage and offer to protect me for a hefty sum, and they do, against the British Bulldog, who attempts to take my title from me. I had gone undefeated in my story playthrough thus far, and I intended to keep it that way. The final challenge was a hardcore match with the returning Cactus Jack at the Royal Rumble. Like all the main event matches in these championship modes, there was a noticeable jump in the difficulty. It was one of the best matches I had had playing and recording No Mercy for this video though. It was back and forth hardcore warfare, plenty of pile drivers and suplex complex variations. Cactus hit his patented double-arm DDT to me on the outside, which made me show some color. Bastard. No one survives the Taz mission though. I successfully retained my Hardcore Championship and went undefeated in this story. I sought to win the WWF Women's title with the ninth wonder of the world, the late great Chyna. The Women's Championship story in No Mercy, at least the one I ended up getting, was a complete joke. It was the easiest in terms of AI difficulty. At no point did I feel a loss looming, and some of the moments in it were downright cringy and disgraceful. It does not hold up well at all. Women's wrestling has come a long way since the turn of the new millennium. The story started with Mae Young, yes, Mae Young in her late 70s at that point, coming out on Raw and declaring herself tougher than all of the other women in the Federation, and that she is the #1 contender for the women's title. I beat the stuffing out of her. It was basically murder. I hit her with my rear special, the rear naked choke drop, and front special, jackknife powerbomb. On SmackDown, Ivory called me a monster for beating up a grandmother on a pension. Chyna just shrugs, which is kind of funny, but then Ivory threatened to expose my puppies on live TV. Okay. I would have a match with Ivory and steamroll through her as well. I was already getting extremely bored with this story. The cat would talk to me backstage and call Tori a tramp. Ugh. The two would have a match on Raw with me as the special referee. I couldn't care less who won. I hit both competitors with specials, and then once Tori locked the cat in a submission, I pulled an Earl Hebner and fucked her over Montreal style. The cat was hella pissed and would fight me in a backstage brawl. Unfortunately for her, landing on concrete hurts a lot more than the canvas of the ring, something she had to find out the hard way. The Women's Championship story was over in a flash, culminating at SummerSlam. But what happened here was just stupid. The reigning champion, Stephanie McMahon, would be terrified of me following my parking lot encounter with the cat, calling me a rabid dog, and, like a coward, would forfeit her title on the spot. This led to a yawn fest of a triple threat match between the top 3 contenders for the belt, me, Ivory, and Mae Young. I won without any struggle, and finally I could move on to another championship. For the tag team titles, I wanted to try to win them with Too Cool, Scotty 2 Hotty, and Grandmaster Sexay. My playthrough was a downright disaster though, as you will soon see. The first match we had was a warm-up against the Stooges Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe. I pinned Briscoe following a sit-out powerbomb with Scotty 2 Hotty, but the stipulation was that we beat them within 3 minutes. So even though we won the match and could continue, it was counted as a failure. After the match, Too Cool danced with Rikishi in the ring, something the trio would do numerous times on TV. As neat as it was to see this make its way into the game, the cutscene happened after every tag match we had in the story. Win, lose, or draw. The novelty of it wore off pretty quick. We would move on to Eddie Guerrero and Chyna. Ironically, this match ended within 2 minutes when I hit Eddie with Sexay's rear special, the full Nelson face drop. On SmackDown, the current tag champs, Edge and Christian, would announce a 4-way elimination match to determine the #1 contenders for their titles. Each team, Too Cool, the Dudley Boys, Hardy Boys, and APA, had 1 member entered in this match. The difficulty here was pretty steep. Jeff Hardy would be eliminated by a Bubba Cutter. I tried desperately to eliminate Bradshaw, but he would kick out at 2 following 2 of my sit-out powerbombs, minutes apart from one another, might I add. Jackass just didn't want to do the job for me. Sadly, I would be pinned following another Bubba Cutter, and Too Cool's chances of becoming the best tag team in the WWF got flushed down the toilet. The story mode ended at SummerSlam, where Scotty and I fought Farouk and Bradshaw. I figured after all these losses, the game was going to go easy on us, but no, the AI was as relentless and unforgiving as ever. Scotty 2 Hottie didn't feel too hot when he was struck by a vicious clothesline from hell and had to be scraped off the mat by paramedics. Too Cool definitely did not look fly today. My tag team playthrough completely shit the bed. Following my dreadful Tag Team Championship pursuits, I was hoping to turn my fortunes around within my Intercontinental Championship path. I played as the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock, who looks absolutely deranged in this game. Michael Cole would interview me regarding the current IC champ, Chris Benoit. That would be a great match to end on, wouldn't it? Ken Shamrock versus Chris Benoit. A submission match between them would be awesome. My first match on Raw was against Perry Saturn. I made short work of him and pinned him using Shamrock's front special, a bridging fisherman suplex. Chyna would then challenge me to a match on SmackDown. She felt that if I couldn't beat her within 3 minutes, I didn't deserve to call myself the #1 contender. Here's the kicker though. I ended up pinning her with a small package right on the 3-minute mark. I was hoping that counted, but no. Hardcore Holly would berate me on my failure the following episode of Raw, calling me a wimp and booking me in a hardcore match against his cousin Crash. I locked in a few submissions on him outside the ring, threw him into the steel steps, and followed it up with a devastating DDT onto the floor mats. I then hit him in the face with a replica championship belt one of the fans was holding. I pinned him 1, 2, 3 with a classic victory roll. Apparently, Hardcore Holly thinks he's Booker all of a sudden, because he then puts me in a match with Viscera on SmackDown. In this one, I made sure to use Shamrock's ankle lock to submit his opponent. I wondered where the IC champion Chris Benoit was and if he was going to make his presence known. Hardcore Holly would enter the ring with Rikishi at King of the Ring and tell the crowd he's one of the most talented and agile big men to lace up a pair of boots. Shamrock would come out and ask Hardcore Holly why he feels he can book all these matches. That's what I'd like to know. Not wanting to be Holly's puppet, Rikishi would kick him in his testicles. We would then team up and batter him in a 2-on-1 handicap match. This was the easiest match I had had in any of my story playthroughs. We both would earn a special at the same time, but Rikishi would beat me to the punch, pinning Holly after a brutal Rikishi driver. By Chapter 6, this story was starting to feel very repetitive. Hardcore Holly's role as Booker would be replaced with Triple H. Hunter would schedule me in a cage match against Rikishi on SmackDown. Since I had played this session months after I had recorded my last, I forgot the controls a little bit, and that I needed high momentum to successfully climb over the cage. Due to that, Rikishi was able to knock me off and turn the tides. He would climb over and win despite my relentless shaking of the cage. It was kinda bullshit. On Raw, Triple H said I wouldn't be able to choose my own matches until I redeemed myself from that loss. Who the fuck does he think he is? The boss's son-in-law? I was put in another time limit challenge, this time against Perry Saturn. I had 5 minutes to make him submit. Thankfully, Rikishi came to the ring seconds in, and I was able to make Saturn tap out well within the time limit with a simple leg lock. By this point, Ken Shamrock seemed to be feuding with Triple H and the rest of DX. At SummerSlam, I would be forced to find a partner to take on the New Age Outlaws. As you could probably guess, my partner would be Rikishi. He said the cage match we had on SmackDown was nothing personal. Triple H had made him do it, and that he respects me. We brought the best out of each other in that match. Oh boy, I think I'm gonna cry. The tag match at SummerSlam was tougher than shit. I had to play it 3 times to succeed, and even when I did, it felt like a fluke. I superplexed Mr. Ass, and Road Dogg, for whatever reason, hesitated when I went for the pinfall, long enough for Rikishi to grab onto him. Things would get even more difficult for me, however. Off-screen, X-Pac had beaten Chris Benoit for the IC title. That son of a bitch Triple H would announce an IC title match at Survivor Series, but that it was going to be a hardcore handicap match pitting him and X-Pac against me. If Rikishi interfered, he would be fired from the WWF. And guess what? The AI difficulty was through the fucking roof. I can't tell you how many times I attempted this one, maybe 5 or 6. I resetted my N64 whenever my continues ran out. This match was an utter nightmare. I tried taking them on legit in the center of the ring. I tried separating the two and softening one up with weapons, but all that did was allow the other to continuously taunt me in the ring and drain my momentum. I came very close 1 or 2 times, but no matter how many weapon shots I landed, strong grapple moves or the rare special, they kicked out again and again and again as if they were superhuman. It was Bronco Buster after Bronco Buster, X Factor after X Factor, and pedigree after pedigree. No matter what I did, DX was a hurdle that I was unable to overcome. Winning the Intercontinental Championship was just not in the cards for me. The final match was just too damn hard, and not in a fun or fair way. But here we go, the big one. Failure was not an option when it came to the WWF Heavyweight Championship. I promised myself I was going to win it by any means necessary. Despite the rage I had towards Triple H for what he put me through in my IC title story, I knew I wanted to play as the game in this one. My first opponent was Taka Michinoku in a qualifying match for the Royal Rumble. The winner of the Rumble, of course, earning a glorious title shot at WrestleMania 16. I beat him in a little over a minute. It was a complete squash. Winning the Royal Rumble is one of the most difficult parts of championship mode in WWF No Mercy, and I managed to do it in epic fashion. The Rumble happens in the early chapters of the world title story. You come out as entrant number 1 and have to outlast 29 other superstars. Even more than that if you have the entire roster unlocked. The current WWF champion The Rock appeared as one of the entrants and lasted the second longest in the match next to me. I made sure I was the one to eliminate him and send him a message that I was coming after his title. Following the Rumble, right to censors Steven Richards bitched and moaned that he lost his chance at a title match at WrestleMania. He would end up interfering in a match I had with Kurt Angle on SmackDown. On Raw, Richards would meet with The Rock and show him some sort of video evidence that revealed him to be the number 1 contender and not me. The man's delusional. Richards and I would face each other in the main event to determine the quote-unquote real number 1 contender. Shane McMahon would interfere in this match, but I still beat Richards after landing 2 pedigrees on him. The Rock would play Booker now, and on SmackDown said that the match I had with Richards was a no contest because of Shane's interference. Due to the video evidence Richards had provided for him, Rocky decided he was going to fight him at WrestleMania, and not me. Fuck you, that's not how this works. Shane O'Mac and Richards would come out to speak to The Rock, and the three would have a nice circle jerk together. Triple H would call them all fuckheads, which is censored. He also says he doesn't want a title match or a number 1 contender match, but a me kicking your ass match. Oh god, that's terrible. The Rock would give me an opportunity to face him at WrestleMania if I managed to pin him or Richards in a handicap match on SmackDown. It was hard as hell, but unlike the match that ended my IC Championship story, this one I was able to win via a small package, as Rocky mysteriously watched on. But guess what? On Raw, The Rock said even though I won, I still wouldn't be going to WrestleMania. You've got to be kidding me. Do any of these stipulations even matter? What the fuck's the point in doing them if some jackass who isn't an authority figure can just make up shit as they go along? Shane McMahon and Steven Richards would come out again and they would all have another circle jerk, probably getting chafed at this point. I enter the arena and propose one final match between me and Richards, the winner getting to move on to WrestleMania, no questions asked. Honestly, my investment in this angle was fleeting, because who's to say any of these promises will go fulfilled? None of them had been up until now. I have the match with Steven Richards, and instead of Shane McMahon interfering, it's his father Vince, who chooses to attack Richards and help me win. On SmackDown, Vince and Shane begin arguing. McMahon family tensions are at an all-time high. Vince approaches me to form a tag team with him to take on his son and Steven Richards. I reluctantly accept, and we win after I hit Richards with a pedigree while Vince locks Shane in a sleeper. On the go-home SmackDown before Mania, Linda McMahon comes out and announces the main event of the pay-per-view, a fatal four-way between Triple H, Steven Richards, The Rock, and the returning Mick Foley. Then, at WrestleMania, Vince makes it a no-disqualification elimination match, so the game is mirroring the build-up to the real-life event, which saw that exact same match take place, billed as having a McMahon in every corner, though of course, the game takes liberties with it, as Steven Richards fills in for the Big Show, who isn't featured in this game coming off of WrestleMania 2000. He had been sent down to Ohio Valley Wrestling OVW during No Mercy's development. Having Steven Richards in this match, the main event of the biggest show of the year, is one of the reasons we all love playing pro wrestling games, because anything can happen in them and our matches don't have to bend to the sometimes misguided desires of Vincent Kennedy McMahon. In my playthrough, it wasn't Steven Richards' night though, as he was eliminated a little over a minute in, following a spike piledriver from Mick Foley and I. The Rock was busted wide open from a pedigree about 4 minutes in, and a short while later, just like the match in real life, there was a miscommunication among the competitors, and a pinfall was broken up despite the rules stating it was every man for themselves. Mick Foley would get eliminated the same way Steven Richards did, with a spike piledriver. I let The Rock go for the cover as I prepared myself for our final showdown. One last pedigree in the center of the ring sealed Rocky's fate and ended the match that clocked in at almost 9 minutes. My story wouldn't end at WrestleMania though, as Vince would come out following the match, congratulate me on my title win, and then kick me right in the King of Kings. On Raw, I called this sleazy bastard out, and he demanded that I thank him. Without his efforts, I wouldn't be the champion. He makes me put my world title up for grabs in a steel cage against his son Shane. After successfully defending it, my heavyweight championship playthrough concluded with a 10-minute Iron Man match at Backlash. I would face one of my WrestleMania opponents, the man I took the title from, The Rock. I had 3 attempts to win this one, and the AI made it a constant struggle, getting pretty cheap with me in areas. It took me 2 tries, and the series of matches I had ended up being the best I had captured for this game. The first attempt was a loss. Rock got a pin over me following a reverse DDT. I guess it's his back special in this game. I managed to tie it back up with a pedigree in the last 20 seconds or so, but draws still count as a failure. There had to be a single winner. My second attempt went much better. I hit a pedigree in the early stages, which gave me the advantage. I even managed to kick out of a pin following a pedigree The Rock stole from me. Rocky tied it up with another one of those reverse DDTs. I really wish he had gone for a rock bottom. It would have made the match that much greater. A second and third pedigree was then delivered to The Rock, leading to another point for Triple H, with about a minute remaining on the timer. He caused me to bleed with a kick in the last 5 seconds, but I was able to walk away with my hand raised in victory. And this ends my look at championship mode. It still holds up rather well despite its issues with the inconsistent difficulty. Like I said earlier, WWF No Mercy is considered an all-time classic, one of the greatest professional wrestling games ever made. With its magnificent gameplay, phenomenal roster, and increased number of match types and colorful arenas, it is, without a doubt, the best wrestling game of the WWF's Attitude Era, and the best produced by Aki in terms of pure content and replayability. That said, there is one fatal flaw about it that not enough people bring up online, blinded by their childhood nostalgia. It's something that only affects the game if you are playing it on its original hardware like I do, but even still, this kind of flaw is unforgivable for any video game, let alone a wrestling one, to have. Early cartridges of No Mercy, the vast majority of the ones sold on release day, the ones that are the easiest and cheapest to track down presently, have a bug in them that will erase your save data at complete random. Some believe it might be linked to using your created wrestlers, doing certain things in championship mode, or playing the same match types over and over again in exhibition. A definitive cause has never truly been determined though. In any case, a lot of players had this glitch happen over the years, with hours and hours of progress, unlocking superstars, or creating wrestlers vanishing within an instant. Disgraceful. No Mercy's publisher, THQ, would re-release a fixed version of the game, even offering trade-ins for the original, but most players were not made aware of this fact. These were the early days of the internet after all. The fixed cartridge has a serial number ending in USA 1. Being that a lot less of these variants were produced than the original version, they are a lot harder to come across and far more expensive to purchase online. Honestly, if you are going to play No Mercy on the original hardware, it's not worth buying the physical upgrade of the game at this point. Don't let yourself be ripped off. Just get the buggy original cartridge and then buy yourself a Game Shark as backup, in case any of your unlockables are erased. Worst case scenario, you just type in a preset code and get it all back within seconds. It's as easy and stress-free as that. I've owned one of the original cartridges for several years now, and not once has the bug occurred in my countless hours of playtime. The fact that it has been experienced by so many people, though, sucks. A video game deleting all your hard-earned work whenever it feels like it is heartbreaking, and shouldn't be something lingering on your mind as you're playing it. Not with a game that came out over 20 years ago, and not with any games that come out now. It's just unacceptable. As much as I love No Mercy for all it offers, with its engaging and infinitely replayable story mode, various unlockables, additional match types, and satisfying bell-to-bell action, it is one of my favorite wrestling games, one of the greatest ever made. Unless you're playing it through emulation, the save-deleting bug has always been a blemish holding it back a little bit on its base hardware, in my opinion. Due to its unreliability, I put it on the same pedestal as the older and quote-unquote inferior WCW NWO Revenge and WrestleMania 2000 that had less features than it, because at the end of the day, to me, all three of these games are interchangeable. They are just as good as the others, in their own ways. Alright, that's gonna do it for this review. I have no idea how long this video is gonna end up being, but I'm glad you stuck it out with me to the end regardless. I hope you had fun, revisited some potential memories, and found everything I said to be insightful. I want to thank you for watching. If you'd like to support me and the content I produce, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon for notifications, share the video or any of my other videos to anyone you feel might enjoy them, and become a producer over on Patreon if you can. I will see you all in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and always stay nerdy.